And a very good evening to you and a warm welcome to the Turning Point. Our guest tonight is Mr. Donanath Fernando, who is the COO of the Advocata Institute, the award-winning Advocata Institute, I might add. Thank you, Donanath, for joining us here today.
Thank you, Faraz.
Thank you. Over the years, I've heard many guests whom I've interviewed tell me that it's essential for economic success, that it's essential that there is stability of government, stability of policy. And along with the election of President Anura Kumar Dissanayake, who got, let's say, only 43% of the popular vote, but that was turned around in the general election to an astounding 159 seats. It is the single time ever that in Sri Lanka that a single party, no coalition, just a single party received in excess of a 2/3 majority. I put it to you, Dana, then that this surely is the ultimate in stable government.
Absolutely, Faraz. You cannot expect more stability as a government than this. Now, I think the next step is to deliver on the people's promises. It also shows that stability came from, I think, quite over expectations from the people, and maybe it could also be the desperation on the other side, because there were no other alternative options, it seems. And the transformation of from 41 to 42% to more than 60% from the presidential election to general election also gives us a signal, because the process the president followed during that period provided some level of example and walking the talk during that period, because the cabinet was said to be at 3 members, and also I think people were concerned whether the president would deviate from the IMF program, whether the debt restructuring would derail. But I think he provided that assurance in the first instance itself. He agreed pretty much with the debt restructuring, which of course he got some criticism, but it gave the confidence on one side, and also with the IMF he had very successful talks. So I think that provided the confidence and stability which brought in from 40% to about 60%, and with pretty much 2/3 majority, and cleared pretty much all doubts.
So, Dana, what's in store for Sri Lanka's economy? We have a government that is rock solid, as you can get, in terms of the mandate of the people. And I'm sure the people, being savvy enough to vote these people in, I say these people, not in a derogatory way, but these people, the new boys on the block, if you like, from 3 seats back in 2015 to 159 this time round. The public have obviously thought about this pretty well. So what's in store for our economy? We had the IMF team here. Maybe you might want to tell us about that, about the third tranche. But it appears to me that the numbers are looking good, and therefore AKD and his team are in a pretty fortunate position. I'm told, tourism is up, so the dollars are going up again. The foreign remittances are up, closing on the previous high of 7 billion. And of course, customs revenue collection is also up. We had an announcement just before the presidential election that it had gone up by 28%. It was about 1.2 trillion. And so the president seems to be in a comfortable position. And is that enough to pay our obligations as we promised the IMF?
The economic stability after our default, I think definitely the president is in a fortunate, on a comfortable situation. But this is not going to be adequate for the moment, for the time being. This is enough. But the formula is going to change for us, where economic growth becomes equal to stabilization.
Right.
At the moment, from the default we came to stabilization. Now it's stable, but we will not be able to stay only at this position for too long.
And what does that mean? When will it change?
It has to change starting from now. So it will depend from the budget that the new government will propose. And
so again, you're talking about revenue.
And on one side, the revenue. I'm not only talking about the revenue. It is the size of the cake that needs to grow. That means our income has to grow. When our incomes grow, of course, the government revenue will grow. At the same time, to an extent, some government expenditures will also grow. But it is everyone will have a better living standard. Everyone will have better income. They will produce more and they will consume more.
But then the flip side is that to produce more, won't our imports also grow?
Absolutely. Our imports will grow, also our exports will grow when we produce more. At the same time, our remittances and tourism and our service dollar income will also grow. So that's how you increase the size of the
So as the economy grows, will we have greater payments to make under the IMF?
Not necessarily. When we grow better, we will, of course, we can improve our productivity, because then the cost of capital will also come down, because then we will come out over a period of time from our default. But of course, what you highlighted, when we grow, if the growth rate is, excellent, then of course on the debt restructuring front, we will have to pay a higher payment, because how it has structured with the macro linked bond is, if your economy grows at a certain pace, of course, the debt reduction will be reduced. So that front is there, but growth is better, because rather than having a low growth trajectory, it is always better to have a high growth trajectory. But from President's point of view, I think the decisions he made on clearing the visa issue, because that helped the tourism sector. And on the other side, that continuation of this IMF program and the debt restructuring was on his, I think he made the right decision. And also he provided some level of confidence for the financial markets, also keeping the governor and the treasury secretary unchanged. And even with the new appointments after the general election, he had kept the finance secretary as it is. So which pretty much gives very positive sentiment on the markets and the international community and the investors. So I think in that sense, he is making the decisions, I would say, very with pragmatism, which is in the right direction. But the important thing is on the budget is the next milestone that he faced, because IMF, already our fourth tranche, third review is delayed. It is delayed because they want to see the budget. Because without the budget, IMF cannot just basically predict what the government is going to do. So the next budget is a crucial point. I think he has appointed the right person who can draft that budget, because the current or the previous Treasury Secretary or the current Treasury Secretary, Dr. Mahinda Siriwardana, knows inside out what was the process. The conversation can carry on. So I think that's the next step, but it has to be done as early as possible, not waiting for about 3 months. I recommend, of course, I think they are going for a vote on account.
So it's vote on account. Will that sort of please the IMF, or will they wait for a proper budget?
No, they will. It will tick the initial boxes, but it will not tick all the boxes. But based on a vote on account and a draft budget, even at a draft level, they can proceed. But I think the director board approval can only be obtained after presenting the budget, because ultimately the parliament has to approve.
So in the meantime, will the third tranche be delayed?
It will delay to an extent, but it won't harm our economy, because the investors will be confident.
Is it more sentiment than actual money?
Absolutely. It is more sentiment than actual money. Yes, absolutely, because you can't also do a budget in a hurry, because then it may not give the right sentiment and the right messaging. So I think it's important that we do the right budget, and also, of course, as early as possible. Then I think we have a lot of challenges, but for the first 6 months, 8 months, I think we are in a safe position if we do not.
Even
make
if
it
we
as a
don't
price.
actually get this next, I think it's the third tranche.
So we need to get the tranche, but again, as long as everybody is aware that with the IMF program, it is just a matter of these elections and the budget
There's a
process.
slight delay.
Exactly, there'll be a slight delay, but it won't harm the process.
Right. And so, what about um, election promises? We have President AKD who said that he will bring down the PAYE rate, I think from 36 to 24. I know a lot of people who are expecting that to actually happen. How will that happen? Will it impact on our commitments made to the IMF?
Yeah. It will impact to an extent, to be honest, because I think there are two promises. One is bringing that from 36% to 24%,
Yeah.
and also bringing down that minimum threshold from 200,000, from increasing the 100,000 threshold to up to about 200,000.
Right.
I think the biggest damage would be done by increasing from 100,000 to 200,000, because then you are basically shrinking your tax net.
Right.
While the actual requirement is broadening the tax net. So that is the concern. But again, from the recent messaging, he hasn't really, he said we are trying to adjust it. He hasn't been very clearly said that they are going to bring it down, increase it from 100 to 200,000. But 36% to 24%, there may be a chance because depending on what's the revenue that we are going to letting go is a question mark. But I think because we also need to understand it's also the people's aspiration that also matters, because when you have a 36% tax rate and an 18% VAT rate, that's too much also on people. But what they have to show is the revenue that they are going to lose out, how are they going to collect it back? That's the formula that they have to work on. But I do not recommend to bring the tax threshold from 100,000 to 200,000, because then you are giving a wrong signal that while the real need is to increase the tax net, you are basically shrinking the tax net down.
On that note, let's go for a quick break. And this is, of course, the turning point with Mr. Dhananath Fernando, the CEO of the Advocata Institute. We'll be back soon after this break. And welcome back to the turning point with Dhananath Fernando, the CEO of the award-winning Advocata Institute. Thank you again, Dhananath, for coming. And we were talking about, is it going to be simple, bringing this 36% down to 24, the PAYE? Will it be simple?
It may not be simple, because it's how are we going to collect the balanced revenue is the question mark.
Right.
But if we can collect it, if we can show how are we going to collect it, which I'm not sure, but I recommend not to impose an additional tax just to cover it, because it doesn't make any sense, because when you're adding another tax, then it has a cascading effect. Unless one option is showing that, okay, we are improving or increasing the tax net for a new segment or something in that sort. But it will not be simple, but it will, of course, politically somewhat will be popular, because especially for the middle class and people who are earning above that threshold, they will have a big relief. And it may have also, to an extent, some impact on the consumption, because when you have more money saved from your salary, of course, you tend to spend it, and it increase your disposable income. So I think it will definitely not be simple, but it is a matter of how are we going to cover that revenue up, or showing that what is the expenditure that we are going to
what practical, real steps can President Dissanayake take to help the have-nots? What can he do to help them?
Basically, the digitization process that he has initiated is one in the right direction, but it will take time, because to do these ENICs, because the problem on helping the most vulnerable people was the targeting issue.
Right.
Because we do not have a system to really identify people, target, and do the cash transfer.
Right.
And at the same time, once you provide that cash transfer, there has to be a mechanism after they are better off, slowly to take it off.
So, but can Sri Lanka's economy now afford to basically give handouts. This is a handout, isn't it?
This is a handout, but this is a better form of a handout if it goes as a cash transfer. Right. Because, for an instance, for us, what we are spending on our entire social safety net is about 150 billion rupees, which is comparatively a very small amount.
Right.
I mean, comparatively,
Yeah.
because my famous example is Sri Lankan Airlines. The debt that we absorbed was equivalent for that.
Right.
And the entire pay collection is also almost about the same amount, about 150 billion, 160 billion. So we have the capacity. We can manage it. And I think that is where our focus has to be.
Right.
I think that's where our president has to basically focus on, cutting that leakage on some of those state enterprises
And how would you, if you were advising the president, how would you advise? What's the advice you'd give him to help? Okay, you give people the handout, but how do you wean them away from that? What do you do so that they can earn that money themselves?
You mean the people who are
vulnerable? Yeah, how do you get them off?
Exactly. So there are multiple categories under this social safety. There are some people who will not be able to actually come back if you are disabled or if you have a very difficult time for natural circumstances. That's very difficult.
Yeah.
For others, you should have a reskilling program.
Right.
Because it's a matter of skill. Because if you have the skill, you can earn a living.
Right.
So rather than a handout, you have to have a separate reskilling process, which you have to collaborate also with, to an extent, with the private sector. It could be the training institutes, it could be the vocational training institutes, and that's a worth investment from the government. Now, if you look at the German training school, such training schools can provide that, can bridge that skill.
But we need more of these people.
We need more of those institutes, more capacity, and that's where the investment needs to go. Not the Sri Lankan Airlines debt absorption, and there are multiple institutes that we all do that. So that would be my recommendation. But of course, it's also to an extent medium term. In the short run, you have to basically do the cash transfers based on the existing information available, and do it on a cash transfer basis, not to meddle with the prices, because what the other side, what the governments are popular to do is either they give a price subsidy for those companies who are bringing fertilizer. That doesn't make sense, because your subsidy goes to the company and people are buying at a concessional rate, but it doesn't drive the consumption down, because then you are trying to use it excessively. But when you do the cash transfer, you have the choice on spending what I want to spend.
Right.
So that's the importance of the cash transfer, and it will come back to the economy, because when someone spends it on somewhere, it will come back.
So, from what you're saying, and my understanding is that this is not, by any stretch of anyone's imagination, this is not a quick fix.
This is not a quick fix.
So it'll take a couple of years.
It will take a couple of years, but the cash transfer process can continue, because there are easy ones to identify that you continue. That if you have the fiscal space, you increase that.
But increasing. I think this is one of my favorite things that I say. Around 350,000 students join the education system every year, and by the time it comes to go to university, there's only about 35,000 spaces. And another 115,000 in tertiary and vocational training. So to increase that slot, the 115,000, that'll take some doing, won't it?
Absolutely. So there actually you have few options. One is the grant options. For an example, even the German training school, it says German is because it was a partnership with German. So likewise, I think there are a lot of multinational, international organizations who are willing to support, because it also in a way helps their economies as well, because most of these technicians was produced here, and which has the global recognition. So given the labor shortages in their respective countries, that has quite a win-win formula. So that's something, of course, but it's not short term, it's medium term and long run. But that is a key area that this government needs to address, because on two sides, it either improves your remittances revenue, or it will increase your tax revenue. So I think that's a worth investment.
And
to
how
consider.
about increasing exports? We have markets, in let's if we take tea, we have a war going on in the Middle East,
Right.
and it's threatening to expand. And somewhere along the line, I'm sure our tea exports are going to be hit. And so, how easy is it to? I know it's very easy to say we must increase our exports, but how easy to actually achieve that?
So again, for us on increasing exports, there's no magic formula. And having on the flip side, now there's a new geopolitical reality with the Trump administration because they are discussing about imposing a new about 10% tariff. The numbers are not yet sure on all imports. So this can work either way, either because most of our apparel imports, the plastic and some chemical imports are for US. So this will have a negative impact on one side. At the same time, there may be some diversification from China to this part of the world. It may also be an advantage. We really do not know. But where we can capitalize is basically our export process. The delay or like the lethargic performance is mainly due to internal processes because there's excessive red tape on one side. There's no land. Even if we get a foreign investor who can produce an exportable product, they do not have adequate land. So it's more a macroeconomic or like a fundamental problem. We do not have the basic factors of production: land, labor, entrepreneurship, and capital. So without fixing that, you really cannot fix this problem in long run. You have to make your product competitive, and you have to fix the land and the labor problem. That's fundamental. So what president can do is on short run to allow more industrial zones because that way you can attract new investors and your turnaround time is quite faster because it won't take like 2 years for one of those international manufacturers to set up a factory if you have cleared the land and if you have cleared all the licenses. Because now the time takes for you to going from that institute to that institute and clear your about 16, 17 licenses.
The ease of business thing needs to be.
Absolutely. But it mainly, the main bottleneck is on the land issue and there's a labor issue. I'm not sure how this government would view on the labor issue because it's about hiring and on the multiple labor codes that we have. I'm sure you are aware that if it's a hotel, there are multiple labor codes. There are so many wages. Both there's shop and office act, and if you are running sort of a
they need to streamline.
Absolutely, you have to streamline. But I'm not sure how this government would view it. But at least if you can fix the land problem, because for one of the main promises for the northern east by the president was that they will give the land back to the real owners, and I think that was one reason that they got a majority in the north and eastern provinces.
Apart from the Vanni, every single district was won by President Dissanayake.
Absolutely. So I think that's an area that this government can capitalize if they want some quick fixes on exports.
And can I ask you, just ahead of asking you for a short report card on our economy, I'd like to ask you, now it appears to me that this president and this government are not interfering with the central bank, nor with the treasury. We've got Mr. Siriwardena continuing and so on. And does this mean that the central bank is in a better place now? Is it independent?
It is in a better place than it was before. It is somewhat independent. Of course, still there are areas that the government can, if they really want, that they can intervene. But I believe it is much better with the independence of the central bank act. It is better than it was before. But for the treasury, I think still it's pretty much under the. While it is commendable that the government appointed Dr. Siriwardena, I do not recommend the president to hold the Ministry of Finance portfolio. This was the same criticism I had when even President Wickremesinghe was holding the same portfolio so as the previous presidents, because the reason is the finance minister's job is a very unpopular job. I mean, you have to increase revenue, cut down expenditure. This is like a typical accountant's job per office, which is not very popular. But when you are a president, you have to seek for the popular mandate. So you have an internal conflict because on one side you are the finance minister, you have to take unpopular decisions, but at the same time you're the president, you have to be popular. So when you are doing both jobs, and of course both jobs are demanding. Minister of Finance is even it's like about 3 full-time jobs. So as the president. So trying to manage both is very difficult. But having said that, since this is a very new government, it's a new political culture, it's the first time that they're experiencing this level of power. He is the most experienced from what I see from their block. So in that sense, it's tricky for them because, of course, also I think he needs, since also the president is a very good communicator, because all these policy reforms, 80% is communication. So by holding I think the finance minister portfolio, he has that communication window as well. Even wherever when he needs to attend the parliament, he has that opening. I think it's a tricky one, but this is definitely demanding and challenging.
So, can you give us a 1-minute report card on the economy, Sri Lanka's economy? How's it doing?
It's stable at the moment, but our stability will depend on the next few months on growth, because from next year onwards, we are starting to repay our interest on even the restructured sovereign bonds. So, of course, we need more and more foreign income to repay that
As
debt.
we speak.
As we speak.
Towards the end of November 2024. What's our growth rate?
We have about 3% plus growth rate, hovering around 3 to 4%, which is good because even the IMF projected about 2%. And the reserves are at a stronger position. As you very correctly said, the remittances, the tourism are picking up. The global environment and importantly the weather is on our side, because if there's a drought, of course, of entire scorecard going the other way. And luckily the external environment, we didn't see any shocks, but this may not remain as it is. So those are the challenges. At the moment we are okay. There's nothing much to worry except if there's like a environmental disaster or something like that. But otherwise, it's in the right direction. But it doesn't mean that we are still out of the woods. We have to do those reforms because, as I mentioned, the growth equals stability in the coming years. And to grow the economy, you have to fix those fundamental problems which you require hard reforms.
Done, Fernando. Thank you very much for being on the Turning Point. And that's the way it was on the Turning Point. Thank you for watching. Do remember to press the subscribe button, won't you? And we'll send you out even more of these programs, provided you press the subscribe button. Thank you. Take care. And as always, God bless you all.